When it comes to life in the sewers, the first thing that comes to mind is probably the Ninja Turtles. Meanwhile, Miguel Restrepo and his wife have been living in an abandoned sewer in Medellin, Colombia for decades, and they don't even eat pizza. The couple have made major renovations to their home, and they aren't bothered by the fact that it's only 10 feet wide, 6 feet deep, and 5 feet high. Despite the small size of their home, the couple managed to install a stove, a fan, and even a bed in it. They also have a TV to entertain themselves. Oh, and their dog Blackie also lives in the tiny house with the couple. Legally, Miguel and his spouse are homeless because the sewer pipes are city property. But the couple continues to make the sewers a comfortable place to live, even though the local authorities can kick them out at any time. Authorities aren't their only problem. It's a sewer, which means that every time it rains, the tiny room would be flooded unless they close the manhole. While such a life may seem far from happy, the couple assured the local media that they're comfortable and they live better than the president himself. Though actually, living in sewers is quite common among the homeless. For example, deep underneath the streets of Las Vegas, there's an entire world. A network of sewer tunnels that are home to more than 1,000 people who have nowhere else to go. These dungeon dwellers call themselves the Mole People. They live in concrete pits designed to drain the rainwater from the city after heavy rains. This means that when it rains, people risk losing their belongings or even their lives. On average, one homeless person a year drowns in the tunnels, but the figures are probably a rough estimate. It's hard to calculate the number of people who live in certain sections of the tunnels. Not everyone lives underground all the time. They come and go for all sorts of reasons. All in all, there are about 12,000 homeless people in the city, and it's not clear how many of them live in the tunnels. However, those who choose to live underground make efforts to establish some semblance of order in their lives. Chairs, tables, plastic boxes, and mattresses can be found in the tunnels. The residents miss the basic comforts of a regular toilet and shower, but they still find ways to adapt and manage. The lack of sun is the real problem, though. In the tunnels, you can't tell if it's day or night. When the clock shows 6, you don't know if it's 6 in the morning or evening. The locals only know it's daytime if there's light at the end of the tunnel. And yet the Mole People go down into the tunnels because they chose to. Unlike the inmates of San Pedro Prison, it really is a weird place. The largest prison in La Paz, Bolivia, is not known for its size, but for the fact that it's, in fact, a unique and self-sufficient community. Unlike other correctional facilities, inmates can work and live with their families right within the prison walls. At San Pedro Prison, inmates can buy or rent homes, start businesses, and even run for election. The prison holds about 3,000 inmates, and that's not counting the women and children who live within its walls. There are several churches, market stalls, restaurants, and even a soccer field with a kindergarten. If you climb the rickety wooden stairs, you'll see small businesses, handicraft workshops, classrooms, a gym, and even a billiard hall. Yes, all that's located in the prison. San Pedro's divided into separate residential neighborhoods for inmates of varying levels of wealth. For example, the rich neighborhood provides inmates with private bathrooms, a kitchen, and cable TV. Well, the wealthiest inmates can afford luxury cells, which sometimes have 3 floors and include a jacuzzi. Keep in mind, we're still talking about a correctional facility. One inmate's been known to pay to add a 2nd floor to his cell to get a view of the city. There are plenty of jobs to choose from bartenders, cooks, waiters, and shopkeepers to guards, politicians, and real estate agents. A few years ago, there were even tours around the prison, and especially brave tourists stayed overnight in San Pedro to partake in one of the local parties. They even built a hotel in the prison for visitors. Still, the majority of inmates here live in overcrowded conditions, with typically 5 inmates being housed in single-room cells. So if you have money, you get a jacuzzi. If you don't, well, it's just like regular life. San Pedro Prison is guarded by police officers, not hired civilians like in other countries. The guards' main job is to patrol the perimeter of the prison walls. They don't care what happens inside, unless, of course, it comes to outright unrest. Therefore, the order or a semblance of it is enforced by the inmates themselves. As expected, the primary means of public control in this context is through the use of violence, particularly stabbing. But what intrigued me the most were the families of the inmates in San Pedro. Prisoners' wives and children can come and go as they please. Without the money earned by the head of the family, they often can't afford to live in the city. Roughly 200 children of inmates are cared for in 2 nurseries inside the prison walls. Some go to school outside San Pedro and spend the rest of their time playing on the prison grounds. Manila is one of the most densely populated cities in the world, and the more people in the city, the more likely some of them will end up living in slums. There simply isn't enough space for everyone, and as a result, people settle down in cemeteries. Literally. What? It's a quiet place, and the neighbors definitely won't bother you. People sleep in shacks built on graves or inside mausoleums. It's free, but there are no basic amenities like sewage, electricity, and clean water here. Manila's cemetery slums can be traced back to the 1950s, when families from the countryside began flocking to the city in search of better opportunities. As of today, there are entire generations living in Manila North Cemetery, the city's oldest and largest cemetery. Some 6,000 slum dwellers from 800 families live on the vast area of 133 acres. And that's not counting the million dead that just lie around. Most people here have no income and take odd jobs to make ends meet. For example, they sell flowers to the families of the dead, make headstones or coffins. Some community members work as caretakers who are paid by relatives of the dead to care for the graves. And by paid, I mean that the caretakers get paid about $11 a year for their work. In 1996, the residents of the Manila North Cemetery asked the mayor to build a school, restroom, and church, but that never happened. So the locals act as teachers for their kids. In fact, it's not a cemetery, but more like an entire city within a city. Families are formed and relationships are built within its walls. The cemetery has a relatively thriving economy. Locals even get electricity by illegally tapping into the town's main power supply to power their homes. Every week, these connections are cut by the authorities, but the people from the cemetery restore them. And so it goes on. Some people live right on the graves of their relatives and are quite happy about it. Alas, the authorities have never been thrilled with the fact that the cemetery was home to a great number of living people, in addition to the dead ones. Eventually, clearing operations were carried out in 2019, the shacks were demolished, and the people were displaced. Have you ever heard of the Principality of Sealand? I didn't know anything about it until Steve showed it to me, though it seemed confusing at first. Sealand is an unrecognized microstate that claims to be the smallest country in the world, so it's impossible to see it on the map. The entire state is basically an offshore platform, Ruff's Tower, in the North Sea, about 7 miles off the coast of Great Britain. The platform was built during World War II, but by 1956 it had been decommissioned. The last remaining personnel had left. And so in 1967, the platform ended up being owned by a man named Paddy Roy Bates. Bates was a major and a British citizen who proclaimed the independence of Ruff's Tower and called the platform the Principality of Sealand. Bates even introduced the Sealand Constitution in 1975, followed by the national flag, national anthem, currency, and passports. And just so you get the rough idea, Sealand is basically two 59-foot-high metal pillar pipes and a 167 by 88-foot platform. There's no elevator or stairs, only a single-story building in the center of the platform, and its rulers, the Bates family, reside in Great Britain. In their absence, Sealand is guarded by two caretakers who work on the platform for a few weeks at a time and are then replaced by their colleagues. Tourism's not popular on Sealand, it's too difficult in terms of logistics, and there's nothing that exciting on the platform. But the microstate has its own soccer team, and a knighthood of Sealand can be purchased for about $120. It seems that knighthoods and noble titles are a kind of merchandise that you can just buy here. Looking for a t-shirt, a mug, and a knighthood? Then this is the right place for you. But to be fair, Sealand isn't exactly a bustling city. Usually, the population of a microstate consists of only 2 people, while on the other side of the world, there is Bantar Gebang, where about 100,000 people work and live. Bantar Gebang is a huge landfill. It's a 198-acre area containing over 39 million tons of garbage, piled up in a mountain higher than 131 feet. The people living there sort through the garbage in search of materials such as plastic that they can sell. They live and eat here, among the mountains of garbage, not wearing any protective gear. They have no gloves or even masks to filter out the stench and fumes of the waste in hot weather. Many people here work at the landfill until deep into the night, and then return to their homes, built from the garbage that was also found there. Garbage scavengers live here as families. In conditions like that, there's a higher risk of disease. aside from potential landslides and hazards posed by the waste-carrying bulldozers. And yet, people live here. In addition to the shacks at the landfill, there are several cafes opened by entrepreneurs. The cafes are furnished with abandoned tables and sofas and offer tea and cookies to the scavengers. Sometimes the garbage fields are leveled for special volleyball games. A small outdoor movie theater even shows movies once a week. What do you think of the 22,000 square foot piece of land that could well be called Fisherman's Island? I admit it may not sound too unusual, but that's until you take a closer look at its history. So, Magingo is an island on Lake Victoria, and it was once the center of a territorial dispute between Kenya and Uganda. How the settlement of Magingo came to be is not entirely clear. Two Kenyan fishermen claim to have been the first to arrive on the island in 1991. And at the time, there was nothing but birds and snakes on Magingo. Another fisherman, this time from Uganda, said he settled on the island in 2004 and found only an abandoned house. For some time, both Uganda and Kenya claimed the island as their territory, sending there their police forces or setting up their flags. The diplomatic conflict didn't turn into war, but ended only when the countries agreed that fishermen could continue fishing on Magingo regardless of their nationality. Today, Magingo Island is a fishing ground for Nile perch, which is then exported to the EU. Exports mean money, and everyone needs money, so the tiny island is covered in shacks like a turtle and barnacles. According to Kenya's 2009 census, the number of people on the island was 131. According to other reports, there are between 400 and 500 people on the island. And if these numbers are true, they make the island one of the most densely populated places on Earth. In addition to houses, there are 4 pubs, a pharmacy, a tiny clinic, a barber shop, and several brothels. Kenyans work on the island all week and leave on weekends, while fishermen from Uganda spend almost the whole year on Magingo. They're too far away from their home. Some women follow their husbands to the island and often work there as well. Another similar place is the artificial island Santa Cruz del Islote. It's located off the coast of the Bolivar Department in Colombia, and according to the information we have, it's also a very crowded place. While estimates vary, Santa Cruz Island is believed to be one of the most densely populated islands on Earth. It was built around 1870 by local fishermen who used coral, trash, stone, and other materials to build up the land at low tide. Aside from an abundance of fish in the nearby waters, the first settlers also appreciated Santa Cruz because there were no mosquitoes here. Why? Perhaps it had something to do with the lack of mangroves. Anyway, more and more people came to the island and were in no hurry to leave. Today, between 700 and 1,200 people supposedly live on the island, depending on the source of data. Given that the island is only 394 by 656 feet, that's a lot. But even with this population density, the lifestyle on Santa Cruz is practically fabulous. It's quiet, and you won't find police here. Apparently, the police just wouldn't have anything to do. 18 families live in 97 houses. There's a school, an infirmary, and a restaurant that also serves as a port. Everyone knows each other and maintains a sense of community that makes Santa Cruz safe. There are no reports of violence or armed conflicts, and people don't worry about crime. Sure, it's a pretty poor island, but locals say that they don't feel any financial problems because they just don't spend that much to begin with. The islanders have only 6 different last names, indicating that they are all related by blood or marriage, and the houses are passed down from generation to generation as there's no room for building new ones. If a family needs extra space, a second floor is added to the existing house. No one uses cars here. The streets are too narrow. And why would anyone drive on such a tiny island when you can just walk? Well, it does sound fabulous. Or maybe it's been too long since I had a vacation. Anyway, let's talk a bit about the modern cave dwellers. Kandavan is an ancient village in the northwest of Iran, located at the foot of Mount Sahan. According to the 2006 census, its population reached 601 people and 168 families. It's a unique example of artificial rock dwellings that are still inhabited today. Moreover, modern cave dwellers still carve their elaborate homes out of volcanic rock. It's believed that the caves in the village of Kandavan were once used as a refuge for people fleeing the Mongol invasion, or as temporary housing for nomads. But then, at some point, people decided to stay here forever and built a village. It's still there today, and some of the houses are about 700 years old. These houses can still be considered some of the most energy-efficient houses on Earth. They remain cool in the summer and warm in the winter, so we can say that the creators of Candovan Village knew what they were doing. By the way, just so you know, although we all tend to think ancient people like Cro-Magnons were cave dwellers, they actually used caves for rituals only. For example, for funerals, or as storage. Living in naturally formed caves was just inconvenient. If you want to learn more about that, just let me know in the comments and I'll tell you more next time. And then I thought, what are we missing today? We talked about islands, landfills, cemeteries. How about the highest slums in the world? Where would one find them if not in Tibet? Larangar is a village in Sirtar County in Tibet. There used to be only a few houses here, built by students of the Serta Lurung 5 Science Buddhist Academy, but the population began to grow rapidly. Monks and lay students alike came here, and as a result, the village, at an altitude of 13,000 feet, became home to 10,000 people. At such an altitude, the locals regularly face a shortage of oxygen. It takes about 3 days by public transport to reach the nearest town, and not all the tiny houses, about 6 feet long, have electricity, not to mention heating. The locals have to make do with firewood. Well, at least they used to. By June 2016, Chinese authorities had ordered to cut the number of residents in half, from 10,000 to 5,000, leaving no more than 3,500 nuns and 1,500 monks, as the huge influx of people living in makeshift houses was becoming a security threat. Then there was a terrible scandal, the forced relocation of thousands of people. Due to all this, no foreigners have been allowed into Larangar since 2016, so it's impossible to know exactly what the place looks like now. But that's a story for another time. See you later.